Well, hey Crosskart fans, today we're taking the VF-1 XL and we're going to make it a roller. If you want the breakdown of each of the components I'm doing today, check out the channel. All the builds are the same, so if you need more details on making tabs or how to build the A-arms or how to build the frame, check out the channel, it's all there. This, I'm just going to be highlighting some important parts and answering some of the questions you've had. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about track width in these, right? So the track width is already defined in the rear because of the homebrew rear spool, hub face to hub face. You can change your overall width with the offset of your wheels, but the front end, I'll tell you how to match up a front end to a specific track width if that's what you're after. And obviously, since we're using the homebrew spool, this is going to be a quick and easy setup, and I will also give you some tips on how to make that sucker even stronger than it already is. So let's get cracking on this. All right, so first we'll strengthen up this rear end since I'm probably going to put it in first. So put the spacer in for the bolt. I haven't welded this yet, it's just tacked. This helps with alignment, putting this bolt in for when you weld, and also keeps it from pulling in. So the plans say use 3/16 or 1/4 inch, but it doesn't have to stop there. Like, you can get, 1/2 inch thick going across here on these, and those aren't going to go anywhere. Now, if you're conscious about weight versus strength versus home built versus manufactured, there's got to be a sacrifice somewhere. So if you want this to be absolutely bulletproof, get these brackets cut in 1/2 inch sections. There's no way it'll twist, there's no way it'll break, but it's going to add a little bit of weight, maybe 2 pounds. So it's all up to you how you want to use this stuff. Now, once it's all prepped and the welding is done, what we can do is we can box it. Boxing makes things stronger. I can put it on the bottom and the top, but pay attention to clearances. That's why I welded this little bar in. The idea is to touch these sides with the main housing and this tube that will triangulate and box this whole lower end and help keep it from twisting. Just gonna measure it across, cut a square, get it welded in. Then it'll look like this. There it is. Ain't she pretty? All boxed in. It doesn't weigh any more. I mean, this was just 1/8, right? But you don't need it to be thick because it's using the wide part of it. So you've got almost 4 inches thick that it's working with. It can't twist all of that. So this is going to be huge for strength. All right, I already have the tabs tacked in from previous. And just a reminder, these bolts, I haven't welded them yet, but on final assembly, these will get welded in. These will come loose under the vibration going on back here. And I put this on backwards. So make sure you weld these bolts. A good solid tack should hold it in place. But for right now, we are just working with the center carrier. All right, so you've got all your parts laid out and you're like, well, what do I do with this? Well, it's pretty easy, or can be pretty easy. The frame kind of guides you where to go. You're going to put a mount up here for the forward lower. You're going to make a dog bone looking thing for the rear, or 4 matching ones. Your C24 can slide to compensate or adjust or place it wherever you want for engine rear end separation plus upper A-arm forward mounting, right? So you're thinking, well, how far apart do I do my dog bones? So it depends on how specific you want to get, right? So me, I just pick a number that looks good. I went off of the distance of my hub. Now, the mounting points plus your hub give you camber gain, right? Camber gain is how much your hub is going to move in or out as you stroke through your suspension. Okay, if you're just building one to drive it, then it's hard to go wrong. Nothing's going to get too out of whack by a quarter inch or even an inch. But if you're in a racing league where a tenth of a second per lap matters, then you're going to have to dig a little bit and plug in some numbers to a program to check scrub angles, check plunge, check camber gain, all that stuff, and apply it to your weight, you know, front versus rear, your wheelbase, all that stuff. But these turn out pretty great because it's all just in the design. All I can tell you is to dive in. You can use my numbers if you want. They work just fine, as you've seen, or you can play with your own numbers. It's a VF. Like, it's made to be either, you know, what I'm doing or what you want to do with it. It's such a cool thing. All right, so I'm starting out with a piece of 2-inch wide, just flat bar. You can use 1/8, 3/16, depending on what you want to do with it. I've got both, but the 1/8 inch is held up pretty well on my other carts, so I'm going to go with this. Now, if you're a long-time follower of the channel, you know that I like 5/8. I like 5/8 for bolt separation from the edge. So I'll measure in 5/8, and I'll measure in from here 5/8. Then I've got my little carrot for my punch to drill my hole. Now, I decided on 5 inches for the Sportsman hubs. So I'll mark out to 5 inches. I'll measure in 5/8. Put a nice carrot. Then I'll measure out another 5/8 for my edge. Now I'll do this on both sides of the steel, so I'm hitting the machines less. I'm actually going to measure the thing as a whole to make sure I have enough for 4 pieces. Maybe an extra one in case I screw up. I do want to point out on these Sportsman hubs, I actually do not recommend them. The lower A-arm mounts. So this idea came from the Facebook group. Thank you guys for that. But these, the lower A-arm mounts have a bushing built into them that goes into this cup. So to use these, I have to figure out a way to put some kind of bushing in here, or they're just going to ride on this bolt. And on the inside, you can see they just bolt in from either side. There's no pass-through bolt. That gives you a ton of clearance to run a smaller wheel if you want, but it does make mounting them complicated. We'll see how that goes, but for now, the geometry is not going to change because the bolt is in the same place. So I'll just use these, tack them up, drive on with the fabrication and figure that out later, or just see if it works. One of the two. Alright, so I've got my tabs mounted, and I've got the bolts just finger tight. It's holding well enough and not wiggling. And I've got some wood that's going to hold it in the appropriate position, and a piece of metal up front, because that's the plate it's going to sit on. Now when we go to line this up, you'll see the curve of the tube is keeping us from going all the way down. So we got to trim this a little bit. So I'm just going to take a marker. I'm going to line this up to where it's going to sit. And then I'm going to look at just taking some of this off. All right, looks like that should do it. It's about the profile of it. Now I do have washers on the inside of my tabs to leave room for powder coat and to make everything a little easier to mount. It's not so tight. Make sure you're test fitting this with your bolts on and tight. Look at that. Easily weldable. I have good separation from my heims to my 1.5 inches. That's why I use this size of heim joint. Now you can see the back just leaves this little bit of a gap. You can take an extra piece of metal and weld it in there. I'll take this and I'll bend it in my vise, fold it over, and weld it on. You can add a full plate across the back, but I kind of like the open look with this single cross member across. And if you weld it nice, it turns out great. All right, once you get your tabs bent up the way you like them to your satisfaction, you can just put a couple clamps on here. Now you don't want to tighten them too much because you can actually spread those tabs if you crank down on it. So I'm just going to do something that keeps it in place. The wood's holding it at the height I want. My clamp's going to hide it at the angle I want, and also the angle this way that I want, right? And once you're happy with it, just tack it up. So now we can turn our attention to the front, right? So first things first, we have to make gussets / mounting points for our forward tabs. Now all I'm going to do is measure the bolts left to right on the back, mark a center line and split that difference, and make sure I have enough plate to mount my forward lower control arm heights. All right, so I got a 2x4 for spacing. I've got that cool little plate we made that's going to act as a gusset, and it's going to act as a mounting point for our lower forward control arm. This levels it with the back. Now you can add anti-dive or pro dive or whatever you want to do. If you want to get into all that, I just make them level. So then I made these tabs. Now these tabs to the center of the hole are 1 inch from the bottom to make clearance for the heim. 5/8 from the front, 5/8 from the top, and I only curve the front in case I want to box the rear. I'll get that in there, put it through there, get my washer for powder coat paint spacing, the other block, make sure that is decently hand tight. Let's see what she looks like. Now I have marked on the front bar the center of the bolt, the edge of my plate, and center line. So all I'm going to do is line this up with the center of the bolt. I'm going to square that off, and I'm going to check my measurement side to side and tack it up. Too easy. Lower A-arm mounted. All right, that's it for the bottom A-arms. I did leave these open. I didn't box them. I want to try to test them without them boxed because dirt gets in these cubbies. So I'm either going to drill a drain hole on the bottom side if I do box it, or leave it like this, just see what it does. So now it's on to the upper A-arms. Now, it's pretty much the same thing except we have C24 here. C24 is adjustable, right? So you can put it anywhere you want for clearance from your rear end or clearance from your engine, right? But the verticals, the upper A-arms will mount to a bracket that comes off of them. So we need to decide where we're going to put C24. Now we want it offset from this a little bit because we're going to put our bracket either on the front side of this or the back side of this. So we've got our A-arms on and tacked into place. I have the axles on and also have the hubs, although they are not connected. The next step is to put the frame at the ride height you're after. Now from here we can start to imagine how this is going to ride. The length of tabs we're going to need, the plunge on this Miata CV axles, what size tire we're going to run. If we run 28-inch tires, we're going to be sitting almost level, right? But if we run 18-inch tires, we're going to be sitting pretty low. So let's get that set up. All right, so these Razor 570 hubs, I am not happy with this whole setup. So I've been on pause for a little bit, and I got the Razor 800 hubs that I like. Nice bushings in here, everything works. So I just pressed in new bearings, and now I'm going to redo the hubs. I found these. The Dorman Miata hubs have a little more meat around the edges so that when you tap your new bolt pattern for your 4x110, if you're doing that, you can print off the template, slide it right on there, take a transfer punch, and you're good to go. Now an extra measure I'm doing is I'm going to tighten this plate on there just to make it super secure to get these holes perfect. Bolt patterns and wheel studs are very tight and very accurate. So let's get this done up so we can get this XL rolling. So what I've done is I have it at my 10.5-inch ride height. I've got this set up for the approximate tire size I'm going to use, which I've fit this up with a 25-inch tire. Being an XL, should have bigger tires on it. I've got my hub pressed. And I have it aligned so that I can just put the hub on and it holds the lower A-arm and the outer bearing carrier. Now I'm just going to match this up, and I have a couple of my little pieces. They're 3/16. I'm just going to tuck that between the A-arm and the hub for spacing for articulation so we don't run into any problems there. Now what I've come up with, I like things to be held in place while I'm trying to adjust it. So I will put the washer between there, and I will get a zip tie. Now we'll just zip tie it so that I can work with it without having to hold it and weld it. I get one on each side, and then I have mine on the inside, but it's just going to hold itself in place. So now we can mess with the A-arm, and it's all just going to hold itself. It makes it so much easier when you get a setup like that. Now my A-arms are at a slight angle up in the front, so I'm just going to get a washer, tuck it under my front hub to match that angle or gap, whatever you want to call it. From here we can start working our tabs. So a good buddy of mine came up with this idea. Thank you so much. And I'm going to use it in this. So these are trimmed to the exact width of the upper, and when you put it on there, look at all that weld area you get from your A-arm. And on the back side, you can actually notch it, run it past, and get a little extra support from your A-arm. That's a lot of weld area to hold these tabs in place. And it's pretty slick. So now I'm just going to take the washer for spacing for powder coat. Run the bolt in. Get one for the front. Get it lined up. Weld it in place. Double check some geometry and some initial angles. But remember, we have 4 heim joints to adjust all of that alignment. All right, so I got the top tabs welded in, and I cut the zip ties off. The bottom is still loose, but it's being held in by that slick little washer. So now it's just a matter of measuring from the bolt to there and making some simple tabs, welding them on, and we will be good to go with this rear end. All right, so the back end is built, and you have a hub to hub distance. Mine came out to just under 56 inches hub face to hub face. Now you're thinking, oh, you want to match your front end to your back end. Well, we can do that. It doesn't matter what ATV you use, you can match your hub width or get your hub width that you want.